It's negative 20 degrees outside, the kind of cold that burns your lungs with every breath. And yet, dozens of ordinary Americans are standing in a Minnesota construction site, forming human chains, passing blankets up to a man clinging to wooden rafters. A man who climbed there to escape federal agents. For hours, this standoff continued, and when those federal agents finally retreated, the crowd erupted in cheers that echoed across the frozen neighborhood. This isn't a scene from some dystopian movie. This happened this weekend, in America, in 2024. But here's what makes this story even more remarkable. It's not an isolated incident. From the frozen streets of Minnesota to the sunny sidewalks of Los Angeles, from Home Depot parking lots to Apple stores, something unprecedented is happening across this country. And if you're not paying attention to what's unfolding right now, you're missing one of the most significant shifts in American politics we've seen in decades. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you will fundamentally change how you understand what's happening in America right now. Let's start in Chanhassen, Minnesota, a quiet suburb about 15 miles southwest of Minneapolis. On a brutally cold Saturday morning, with temperatures plunging well below zero, Federal Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents, ICE, arrived at a house under construction. Their target? 2 construction workers. Now, what happened next wasn't planned. There was no organization behind it, no activist group coordinating a response. What unfolded was purely spontaneous, and it reveals something profound about where America stands right now. When the ICE agents moved in, the 2 workers did the only thing they could think of. They climbed into the exposed rafters of the unfinished house. Up there, in the freezing cold, with nothing but wooden beams between them and the winter sky, they waited. And then something remarkable happened. Word spread. Someone posted about it online, and within hours, a crowd began to gather. Local residents, people who had never met these workers, people who simply saw a post on social media and felt compelled to act, they showed up. They brought blankets, they brought coffee, they brought food, and they formed a human barrier between the ICE agents and those 2 men in the rafters. One witness described the scene as mind-blowing, watching people brave negative 20-degree weather to protect strangers who were, just hours before, building homes for their community. The tension was palpable. There was shouting, there were whistles. At one point, things nearly boiled over into chaos, but the crowd held firm. Eventually, EMTs convinced one of the workers to come down. He was taken by ambulance, not by ICE, for medical attention. But the second worker remained up there, in those freezing rafters, as the standoff continued. And then, ICE left. The federal agents, facing a wall of determined citizens, retreated. The celebration that followed was captured on video. People hugging, chanting, tears streaming down frozen faces. "We value immigrants in our community, and will do anything to protect them," one person shouted. But the community wasn't done. Fearing ICE would return, they coordinated an extraction. They helped the second worker down from the roof, while others locked arms to create a safe corridor. Then they lined up their cars, multiple vehicles, and drove off in different directions so he could leave undetected. Think about that for a moment. Ordinary Americans, in freezing temperatures, organizing an impromptu operation to protect a stranger from federal agents. This isn't something you read about in history books about other countries. This is happening right here, right now. But here's what's crucial to understand. Minnesota wasn't an isolated incident, not even close. The very next day, Sunday, postal workers in Minneapolis came forward with something disturbing. They shared photos and videos showing what they claimed were ICE agents using the Lake Street and Powderhorn post office parking lots to stage their operations. Vans with tinted windows, body armor, guns, one worker described. We shouldn't have to work in that kind of environment. These postal workers, essential public servants, felt compelled to speak out publicly. We want people to know we are not working with ICE, they said. We support our immigrant coworkers and neighbors. We want to see a society free of secret police. Let that phrase sink in. A society free of secret police. Those are words you expect to hear from dissidents in authoritarian regimes, not from American postal workers in Minneapolis. Meanwhile, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, temperatures hovered around 14 degrees as hundreds gathered outside the federal courthouse. Their cause? Supporting Hannah Dugan, a sitting judge who was arrested back in April after allegedly trying to help a man in her courtroom when ICE agents came for him. The Trump administration's decision to arrest and perp walk a sitting judge sent shockwaves through the legal community. And as her trial began this week, Milwaukee turned out in force, again, to defend her. In Maine, Democratic politicians, including candidates for governor and Senate, joined rallies supporting Somali Americans, directly responding to what critics have called Trump's increasingly racist rhetoric toward that community. In Huntington, New York, protesters gathered outside the local police station, outraged that local law enforcement had been seen helping federal immigration agents. In Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Kenner, Gonzales, large, diverse protests erupted against Trump's immigration enforcement. The state's attorney general found herself facing uncomfortable questions from local news outlets about the state's cooperation with federal agents. And in El Paso, Texas, residents protested at Fort Bliss, a site that now holds nearly 3,000 detained immigrants, with plans to expand to 5,000. The ACLU has reported disturbing conditions inside. Last week, there were reports of a man dying at that facility. Here's what makes Fort Bliss particularly haunting. It's the same location where the United States government imprisoned Japanese Americans during World War II. The same site, the same purpose. History, it seems, has a bitter sense of irony. Now, what's particularly interesting about this wave of protests is that they're not just targeting government agencies, they're targeting corporations. Home Depot has become ground zero for consumer activism. Why? Because the company has refused to say or do anything about the fact that ICE agents have been routinely using Home Depot stores and parking lots to stage immigration raids. And Americans are furious about it. This weekend, protesters flooded the Home Depot in Manhattan, marching through the aisles chanting "ICE out of Home Depot." In Encinitas, California, demonstrators dressed as cheerful Christmas carolers in Santa hats, but instead of holiday songs, they were singing about boycotting the store chain. In Albany, New York, similar scenes played out. The message everywhere was the same. If Home Depot won't speak up against how the Trump administration is using their property, then customers should take their business elsewhere. But Home Depot isn't the only corporate giant feeling the heat. Apple stores in Portland, Oregon and Southlake, Texas have been besieged by protesters demanding the company restore an app called ICE Block to their app store. The app helped people alert their neighbors when ICE agents were spotted operating in their area. The Trump administration pressured Apple to remove the app, and Apple complied. Now, protesters across the country are calling out Apple CEO Tim Cook by name, demanding the company reverse course. In an age when tech companies love to position themselves as champions of human rights, this controversy exposes an uncomfortable truth about where corporate values end and corporate compliance begins. Now, if you're wondering whether all these protests represent just a vocal minority, a small group of activists making noise while the majority of Americans quietly support the administration, let me show you the numbers. Because the numbers tell a very different story. According to the latest AP polling, President Trump's approval on the economy, the issue he has staked his entire political identity on, is underwater by 36 points. Let me say that again, 36 points. Only 31% of Americans approve of how Trump is handling the economy. 67% disapprove. On healthcare, it's even worse. Trump is underwater by 40 points. And on immigration, the issue Trump considers his signature policy, the centerpiece of his political brand, he's underwater by 22 points. These aren't numbers from liberal pollsters. This is the Associated Press, and they paint a picture of a president who is, by any objective measure, failing catastrophically in the eyes of the American public. But here's what makes these numbers even more remarkable. They were collected before this week's healthcare deadline, the deadline for Americans to sign up for health insurance under the Affordable Care Act. Because of what Trump and Republicans did in their legislation this year, cutting subsidies that supported the ACA, more than 22 million Americans are about to see their health insurance premiums double, on average. Doubling. This isn't inflation. This isn't market forces. This is a purely man-made crisis, a Republican-made crisis. They flipped a switch, and now tens of millions of Americans are facing an economic disaster. When local news in Oklahoma, a deep red state, is running segments featuring protesters demanding affordable food and criticizing the president for telling Americans they don't need 37 dolls for their children, when that's the coverage in Trump country, you know the political winds have shifted dramatically. But the healthcare crisis extends far beyond insurance premiums. The Trump administration is systematically dismantling America's public health infrastructure, a system that was once the gold standard for the entire world. At the CDC, experts have been fired en masse. In their place, the administration has installed what critics call a flock of quacks in the upper levels of the nation's health agencies. When Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. abruptly fired the head of the CDC, it triggered a wave of resignations from top officials. The scientific priorities of the agency are now being led by, and I wish I were making this up, a realtor and an aviation attorney. Not career scientists, not medical professionals, a realtor and an aviation attorney. The recent Vaccine Advisory Committee saw personal anecdotes presented instead of scientific data. CDC scientists weren't even presenting at their own meetings. According to Dr. Deborah Oury, the former chief medical officer of the CDC, who resigned in protest, there are now over 14 political appointees at the agency, when normally there would be 2 or 3. I don't know if CDC will survive this year, Dr. Oury said, if it continues like this with the budget cuts, staffing cuts, and political leadership. And the damage isn't confined to the CDC. At the Department of Veterans Affairs, the administration has announced plans to eliminate more than 35,000 healthcare jobs, 35,000 doctors, nurses, and medical staff, gone right before the holidays. Merry Christmas to the veterans who depend on that care. At FEMA, an agency that hasn't exactly distinguished itself recently, Trump is installing a new leader of the Office of Response and Recovery who has zero discernible emergency management experience. But he did claim the 2020 election was stolen from Trump. He also claimed the 2016 election was stolen from Trump, an election Trump actually won. That's the qualification now. Loyalty over competence, ideology over expertise. But here's where the story takes an interesting turn. As the federal government retreats from science and evidence-based governance, states are stepping into the vacuum. California Governor Gavin Newsom announced that the state has hired Dr. Deborah Oury and the former CDC director to lead a new California public health initiative. Their mission? To fill the gap left by the Trump administration's systematic retreat from science. This represents something potentially transformative, the emergence of state-level public health leadership as a counterweight to federal dysfunction. California, with an economy larger than most countries, is now positioning itself as an alternative to Washington. The state is even exploring how to maintain connections with the World Health Organization after the U.S. withdrawal, something previously unthinkable in American federalism. When you can't trust what's coming out of federal agencies, Dr. Oury explained, states and regional groups need to step up and provide that leadership. Other states are taking notice. Across the Western region, 4 states are already working closely with California. Discussions are underway with other regions about building a national network, a parallel public health infrastructure that operates on science and data rather than ideology. Now, let's talk about something that should concern every American, regardless of political affiliation: the state of the FBI. The agency is, to put it bluntly, a hot mess right now. Deputy Director Dan Bongino, a right-wing podcaster with zero FBI experience, whose main qualification seems to be his previous statements about how the FBI should be eliminated, is reportedly on his way out. Competing reports suggest he's either already cleared out his office or is planning to decide about his future in coming weeks. A recent report prepared for Congress by active duty and retired FBI agents referred to Bongino as something of a clown. The White House even installed a co-deputy director, an unprecedented move that was widely interpreted as the first step toward replacing him. But the chaos extends to Director Kash Patel himself. Reports have emerged that Patel diverted an elite FBI SWAT team to provide security for his girlfriend. The same team allegedly drove his girlfriend's intoxicated friend home more than once. Patel has reportedly used government aircraft to visit his girlfriend, to take a golfing trip to Scotland with friends, and to visit a Texas hunting resort called, and I cannot stress enough that this is real, the Boondoggle Ranch. You can't make this up. But the most damaging behavior involves Patel's social media habits. After a terror plot was uncovered in Michigan, Patel posted about it on social media before investigators had even filed charges. Some associates of the suspects saw his posts, realized arrests were imminent, and accelerated their plans to flee the country. One suspect was only intercepted at the last moment at the airport. When Charlie Kirk was fatally shot in Utah, Patel posted that the subject was in custody. 90 minutes later, he had to retract it. The person had been released. And this weekend, after a shooter killed 2 people and injured 9 others at Brown University, Patel proudly announced that a person of interest had been taken into custody. Hours later, that person was released. The actual suspect is still at large, armed and dangerous. The FBI is offering a $50,000 reward for information. So what does all of this mean? We're witnessing something unprecedented in American history. A simultaneous collapse of public confidence in the federal government across virtually every metric, combined with a spontaneous, grassroots resistance movement that's spreading from coast to coast. From frozen construction sites in Minnesota to courthouses in Milwaukee, from Home Depot aisles in Manhattan to Apple stores in Texas, ordinary Americans are making a choice. They're choosing to stand up. When Indiana Republicans defied Trump's demands to redistrict their state, refusing to be bullied, they were reading the political weather. When Maine's governor announced she's ending cooperation between local police and federal immigration agents, she was responding to that same weather. The protesters who filled the Indiana state capitol day after day, demanding their Republican legislators stand on principle, they may have put steel in those politicians' spines. But with a president this unpopular, this reviled, failing this visibly, those Republicans can also see which way the wind is blowing. They don't want to go down with this ship. Nobody does. What we're witnessing right now isn't just politics. It's a fundamental renegotiation of what America stands for, who it protects, and what kind of country it wants to be. The people standing in negative 20-degree weather to protect strangers, the postal workers speaking out against what they're seeing, the doctors leaving Washington to build something better in the states, they're all part of the same story. And that story isn't over, not by a long shot. If you found this video informative, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. The situation is evolving rapidly, and we'll be here to break it all down for you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think happens next? Is this resistance sustainable? Can states really fill the void left by a dysfunctional federal government? I want to hear from you. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay vigilant. This is just the beginning.